Just give everyone a few minutes to join because I can see the numbers cropping up. So I'll just give everyone one more minute to join. Hi, welcome everyone to this month's June's webinar, Re-Engineering Pride, and this month's theme is Going Beyond the Rainbow. This continues into engineering's monthly webinar series. June is Pride Month, where lots of companies change their logo to ones that include pride flags, progress flag flags, or similar. It's also the month where accusations of pink washing or rainbow washing tend to increase. For this month's episode, we have invited several speakers to talk about the different initiatives that go beyond the rainbow flag icon and could make real differences within your organization to improve their culture. I'm delighted to be joined by two speakers. Firstly, we have Eric Tomlin, is the EDI platform manager at the Royal Academy of Engineering, where he oversees Culture Plus, which is the Academy's equality, diversity, and inclusion platform. I'll let him tell him much more about the platform. But Eric himself has worked at MTV in music licensing for 14 years, where he founded and chaired the LGBT Employee Resource Group. He's also founding a steering committee towards Intermedia, the LGBT network for professionals in media. Secondly, we have Christina, who graduated with a BSc in Organisational Psychology and Behavioural Economics from City University London. She has since joined the IMechE in 2017, supporting education and outreach, simultaneously championing DE&I agenda across the institution. Since 2021, Christina is leading the IMechE's ambitious D&I strategy, implementing inclusion priority initiatives that drive positive and meaningful change across the institution. So with that, for a very interesting talk, and I'll hand it straight over to Eric if he'd like to tell us a bit more about Culture Plus.
Thanks, Fiona. I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully you can see this. If you cannot see it, please unmute or let me know somehow. But yes, so I'm going to talk about Culture Plus, but first let me give you a little bit of background about me. Fiona already went through some of the basics, but I came out in the 90s when I was just a small child. So I went to Illinois State University, the same place as such famous LGBT icons as Sean Hayes from Will and Grace and Jane Lynch from Glee. So I joined Pride, which was their LGBT network, initially as a way to make some gay friends, because it was the 90s. And then I quickly aligned with the mission of LGBT equality. It was the 90s after all, and things weren't great. I graduated, went to grad school, then moved to New York, where I started working for MTV. In 2008, they launched their employee resource groups, and I joined the LGBT one. And MTV was huge in New York, and I found joining the ERG was a really great way to connect to like-minded people in the company. It also really gave me a lot of opportunities to work with new teams and develop different skills. But I then transferred to the London office, where in London, we didn't have any employee resource groups at all. So instead, I got my gay fix by joining the London Gay Symphonic Winds, which really sort of saved my life. I'd always been a musician, and when I lived in New York, I just felt too intimidated to try and join any ensembles. So when I found out there was an LGBT wind band in London, I was like, oh, I definitely need to be part of that. And so not only did I join, but within 2 years, I was sort of running it, which was really fantastic and such a great way to spend my time outside of work. Yeah. So then in 2012, MTV, or Viacom, as it was called at the time, launched the ERGs in the UK. And so they started with a group just for parents. So I was confused because I was like, hey, what about LGBT people? We need a group too. And I know they have one in the New York office. So perhaps I should have kept my mouth shut, because they were like, all right, well, if you want that, then you're gonna have to start it and you'll have our support. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to be in charge of this. It was a lot of work, and it was a huge learning curve where I realized that what would have really benefited me the most would be to hear how others were doing this at other media companies. So my co-chair and I then helped found Intermedia, which is a lot like Inter-Engineering, but for media. Over the next 10 years, then I became more and more involved with our ERG. And what really got me most excited was to collaborate with other ERGs and focused on intersectional events. I decided to shift my career away from music licensing, which now I realize I failed to mention that's what I was doing at MTV as my full-time gig, and moved to more of a diversity inclusion role. So I left MTV. I worked for a small D&I consulting firm, and then I got my job at the Royal Academy of Engineering in 2023, having never worked in engineering in my entire life. You can see some of these pictures. There's me and Ian McKellen. There's a picture of me from my time at Illinois State University, which you can guess which one I am in that picture. And then there's me and my friend Raph in our little rainbow outfits for Pride. So what is the Royal Academy of Engineering? I know you're all engineers, but you might not be exactly clear as to what we do. So let me just tell you, our aim is to harness the power of engineering to build a sustainable society and an inclusive economy that works for everyone. So we're supporting the engineering profession as a whole, and we have 3 pillars of actions by which we do this work. So we grow talent by training, supporting, mentoring, and funding the most talented and creative researchers, innovators, and leaders from across the engineering profession, with an aim to help over 7,500 professionals enhance their leadership skills. We drive innovation by investing in some of the UK's most creative and exciting engineering ideas and businesses. In partnership with industry, entrepreneurs, and academia, we're on course to support the growth of more than 500 companies through the Enterprise Hub. This support comes not only through millions of pounds of funding, but also lots of training, upskilling, and connecting with our fellows. We'll also influence policy through the National Engineering Policy Centre, providing independent and expert guidance to government, drawing on the expertise and creativity of over 450,000 engineers, mainly through fellows and partnerships with PEIs and organizations like Inter-Engineering. So Culture Plus in particular is a direct way for us to show that we're achieving these top 2 pillars. So what is Culture Plus? Culture Plus is the Royal Academy's and equality, diversity, and inclusion platform, and the program that I manage personally at the Academy. So it was created in 2022. The platform provides startups, scale-ups, and SMEs in engineering the tools they need to embed inclusive cultures as they grow. This QR code will take you to our sign-up page if you wanted to learn more about it. As with all of our industry-facing programs, Culture Plus was born out of a research project that the Academy embarked on. So our research found that startups, scale-ups, and SMEs make up 99% of private sector business in the UK. So if we really wanted to move the needle on D&I and engineering, we need to focus our efforts there. We then did extensive research identifying the myriad of challenges that small organizations face, such as funding, product innovation, recruitment, structure, and retention, and then tried to map them to various solutions. So we quickly reasserted that the organizational culture is the key aspect connecting all of these challenges. And it was really the key area that small and medium organizations didn't know how to address. Existing EDI support was either tailored for large and well-resourced organizations or only addressed each challenge singularly. So we sought to create a resource that would serve as sort of the one source of truth that would help startups, scale-ups, and SMEs create and support an inclusive culture that will thrive and scale as they grow. So partnering with the Honeycomb Works, an organization that uses science, technology, and data to encourage behavior change, we piloted the platform in 2022 with 14 organizations, collected a lot of data, made a lot of significant changes, and then publicly launched Culture Plus. Launched in November of 2023, Culture Plus is currently supporting 35 organizations to understand and improve their culture. So our mission is to provide engineering startups, scale-ups, and SMEs with the tools they need to foster inclusive cultures that support their sustainable growth. The platform is designed to help you identify barriers to an inclusive workplace, and then overcome them. So it does this by providing specific support for individuals to learn and practice inclusive behaviors, whilst also providing organizations guidance on how to put these policies and structure in place to make sure that these inclusive behaviors are scalable and embedded across their organization. So by making inclusivity an important component of your culture from the start, your engineering startup is invested in an innovative and engaged workforce that can contribute to the long-term business success. Who is this for? So we support startups, scale-ups, and SMEs in engineering and tech in the UK that fit the 5 following criteria. It must be a startup, scale-up, or SME that has a strong or unique solution that requires engineering thinking. It's a pretty broad definition. So the company should be between 3 and 250 employees. It should be UK-based and at pre-Series A or pre-Series B funding. This funding, if you're not familiar, refers to the initial sums of money a business venture raises, the early investment that seed funding provides to a business is normally used to facilitate business growth and stimulate income generation. Often businesses have several rounds of funding from pre-seed all the way through to Series E. And we're focused on helping organizations that are smaller and strapped for resources. So therefore, I think that this tool is most appropriate for those of pre-Series A or pre-Series B funding. What does it get and how do you work? How does it work? So Culture Plus first supports everyone in your organization by providing modular training on inclusive behaviors. So these modules are listed above and cover topics such as embracing failure, inclusive communication, and valuing feedback. Individuals then go through 360 feedback cycles on these behaviors where they sort of assess how often they're performing the behaviors and how often their colleagues are performing the behaviors to better understand their own strengths and development needs. They can then focus their time developing the skills that are most needed with the bite-sized learning and resources that are available. So these behaviors, when practiced consistently by everyone, enable the organization to unlock better collaboration, understanding, and innovation. Culture Plus also supports organizations with case studies, articles, mission statement guides, policy guides, belonging surveys, impact measurement tools, and recruitment action lists. Some of these examples of these resources are listed on this slide. So they're all really cleverly organized into what we call EDI roadmaps, which show you what you need at what stage of growth your organization is in. So for example, if you have between 4 and 10 people in your organization, Culture Plus will show you what policies you should have in place, which core cells individuals in your organization should be working on, and your next steps of focus, what those should be. So what makes Culture Plus unique? It's more than just a toolkit or a quick fix. It's really sort of designed to be a long-term partner that will help organizations and the people in them understand how to create an inclusive culture, knowing exactly what to do by allowing you to practice and refine behaviors so that they become habits and embedded across all of your staff. So the platform draws on research from social, cognitive, and organizational psychology, behavioral economics, and neuroscience. The latest thinking is applied to develop, test, and create practical, data-driven solutions to help individuals change their habits and organizations shift their culture. It gives you all the data to show you organizational risks and progress on your EDI goals. We can correlate the data on the platform with competencies and key business measures to create a unique value for your organization. So we'll give you answers to all your burning critical cultural questions, even the ones that you don't even know that you need to ask. So for example, we'll give you quarterly reports that'll show you exactly what's going on in your organization. And you might think that high scores across, inclusive communication indicate that you're doing really well, but our reports will dive into the data and show you if, for example, 90% of your employees are scoring really high on inclusive communication, but the 10% that are not scoring everyone high on inclusive communication are all from the same demographic, like LGBT people, for example. We'll highlight that and let you know that there's a difference in experience for certain demographics, and here's what you need to do to make sure that we shift that culture to be more healthy. Also, it's unique because it's specifically designed for startups, scale-ups, and SMEs in the engineering sector. It takes a holistic approach to embedding inclusive culture, which is proven to unlock innovation, problem solving, and psychological safety in your organization, helping you and your company successfully tackle all the challenges your business faces as it grows. So why is there such a focus on specific behaviors? Well, we think it's really helpful to give people tangible actions they can take. All the behaviors recommended are objectively positive add-ons that anyone can do. So we're saying these are the things that you should do rather than these are the things that you shouldn't do. And I think that's a really helpful sort of mindset. We also know that it takes 25% of a group to shift a culture. So it's a really effective way to bring about a culture change in an organization. So if you think about, a group of 4 friends. If one person in the group sort of calls out another and says their behavior isn't okay, then the rest will immediately understand this behavior isn't accepted here. And then if 25% of your workforce are adopting these inclusive behaviors, such as responding with interest to views different from my own. So instead of dismissing a new idea, you see someone else asking for more information, others will sort of do the same thing. And this really allows people to feel a little bit more safe, to take risks and challenge each other, and hopefully be more inclusive and innovative. So that is Culture Plus. If you are interested in learning more, you can point your phone to the QR code on the right for a digital brochure, or you can email me and set up a one-to-one. We'd love to, spread the word about Culture Plus and get more people signed up.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing about that. Very interesting. I'll just leave a few minutes if people wanted to ask direct Q&A questions now. If not, I'll have a full Q&A session at the end for both of the speakers. Yeah, it was very interesting. Especially one question from me, how many companies are you targeting? I heard you say that it was 35. Is that double, or sort of what are your ambitions around what's the capacity that the system could take it to?
I mean, the sky's the limit. We want everybody. We want everybody on. Like I said, what we identified that 99% of private sector business is smaller organizations. And so in all the scoping for this, we realized that it's just so hard to know what's good practice, because there's so much stuff out there and all of it's sort of competing for your attention. And a lot of it, especially the things that are designed for smaller organizations, are solving just a single problem. So there's here's how to hire, or here's a how to hire kit, or here's a unconscious bias training. We really wanted to make sure that we could put the Academy's name to something and give it some legitimacy and make sure that it was addressing multiple problems and really helping organizations sort of build that culture that is really going to help them successfully tackle all the challenges that they're really facing. So yeah, everyone should sign up.
Excellent. I'll move on to our next speaker now, and yes, so Christina, welcome, and if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Fiona, and what a lovely presentation, Eric. I'll be sharing my screen in a moment, and give me just a few moments. I hope you can see my screen. Can you?
Yes, yeah, perfect.
Can you still see my slides? All good?
Yeah, all good.
Fabulous, fabulous. Thank you so much. Yes, perfect. So hello everyone, and I'm so honored to be here with you all today, and thank you so much for inviting me to share this space with such an inspiring community. And as Fiona introduced me earlier, my name is Christina. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, IMechE. Hope most of you on the call watching the recording of this webinar will be familiar with our institution. So a little bit about myself. I moved to the UK when I was 17 years old. I was originally born in Russia. I grew up in a small country called Moldova, and not Maldives. That a lot of people say, "Oh, is it Maldives? How come you moved from Maldives?" No, it is Moldova. It's just next to Ukraine, sandwiched between Romania and Ukraine. And I'm a former semi-professional tennis player, so I really like playing tennis. And I have a huge passion for understanding people, behaviors, and what makes us thrive, really. And it's been a passion from early years, probably as long as since I was about 13, probably, since I discovered psychology and I started reading a lot of books in the space. So I pursued my studies when I was 17, came to UK, went to college, pursued my studies in psychology and sociology. Then I I went to university, City University, and I specialized in organizational psychology and behavioral economics. So today I wanted to talk to you about iMeiki, where our journey at iMeiki in the D&I space, and then I'll go deeper into more simple actions that, you know, we've seen have really brought a lot of benefit to the institution, and kind of what's our plans forward and how you all can get engaged with what we're doing. So following really nicely from what you're talking, Eric, about culture, you know, I wanted to just warm us up a little bit and, you know, talk about what is culture actually. And if you can access your chat function, can you drop, you know, a line, a word or two on what comes first to mind when you think about culture? And whilst you're doing that, I'll tell you that, you know, the first time I really understood what culture is was when I moved to London, to UK when I was 17, because there's such a huge difference between Eastern European culture and being in UK. And one of the few things that really came to me was about the small talk about the weather before you start a conversation, when you go into the shop or on a call or you're meeting someone in the foyer. You know, it was so typical and so different because we don't use, you know, in my culture back home, it's not something that we do. Then, you know, the culture around saying thank you and sorry, apologies, a lot of times, and can I kindly ask you for something? You know, it's not part of my culture. So that stood out to me when I came to UK. And I'm not sure I can see the chat function. I can't go back to see the chat function, to be honest.
It's okay, I can read them out. So we had one response that said the atmosphere, what people think is acceptable. It's one response that we've had through.
Yeah, atmosphere, absolutely, yes. So there's usually there's no one definition talking about culture. There's so many of them, you know, you can endlessly talk about culture probably. But one common definition about culture is that it's a collection of values, expectations, and practices that guide and inform the actions of all team members. That's the kind of very common one you'll find. And this one's particularly I picked from one of the books I was reading, and I really found it very neat and very right to the point. And a little bit of a stat: more than 4 in 5 people leaders believe that creating a healthy culture is a really crucial element of their role, with 84% of leaders saying that creating a healthy culture was either the most or one of the most important parts of their role. So that really places it at the center and heart of what we do every single day. At the institution, our focus has been on transforming our culture and changing people's hearts and minds. So it was clear to us that by changing the culture, we could shift the dial and make the iMeiki a space for people from all walks of life to feel welcome and valued, and feel they can thrive and develop a sense of belonging as part of our engineering community. And we knew we need to build a solid foundation before we dive into more tangible actions. And the key priority was to bring people together, both staff and our members, to gain an understanding on topics surrounding diversity and inclusion. But most important, to take them on a journey to understand why is it important for the society, for the communities we live in, why is it important to the iMeiki, and the benefits it brings to the engineering community. One of the most important things for me was to really make people understand why it matters to each of us individually. So why does it resonate? Because when it resonates personally, then it really becomes part of you, a part of everyday life, that, you know, your actions and your behaviors. So to do that, back into 2021, when we released our first D&I strategy, we rolled out a comprehensive D&I learning program, which was a transformative exercise. And I remember a year later, when I came back from maternity, I really felt a shift in culture. And by that, I mean, I felt a shift in the language you used in meetings, you know, on the corridor, when we're getting a coffee. I really felt a shift in behaviors and actions and attitudes, for sure. And what the program also did, it empowered people to apply their knowledge and tools in their work. So empowered people to collectively shift the dial towards building a more inclusive environment for all. And, you know, if we go further, it really helped people understand how they can remove barriers in our processes and systems to ensure that whatever we do is inclusive in the different parts of the organization, because there's so much we, you know, as D&I practitioners can do in the workplace. We have to empower people to really lead the way. And, you know, just to say, by no means we're there yet. As many organizations, we are on a journey, and each organization will have its own journey. There are a number of other activities and initiatives that we at iMeiki found helped us shift the dial in the right direction. And, you know, back to the theme of today's webinar, having a rainbow logo for the month is a great way to publicly show your appreciation and support for the community. But it actually does very little to make a tangible difference to the community, both inside your company and in the wider world. So how can you actually move from messages of solidarity into action? And again, by no means we're absolutely there yet. We're somewhere in the middle, but we're trying our best. And I thought today I'll share with you a few simple things, but yet very effective and impactful that worked for the institution. So first of all is all around raising awareness. So I find that a lot of times people have a lack of awareness, and then when they educate themselves on prior history, it really changes people's attitudes, and overall people become more confident engaging in conversations around, you know, LGBTQ plus communities or any other communities really. With that, you know, to keep that awareness happening all the time, so we don't lose momentum, because, you know, it's one thing, training is really powerful, but once you deliver a training or a workshop, you have to keep the conversation going. And we ask ourselves, you know, how do we actually do that? And we've introduced something called inclusion moments. And I think a few companies might be using that. So we have an inclusion moments library on our webpage, the DNI webpage. And it's really to raise awareness and educate ourselves. So we have lots of different topics, but people can create an inclusion moment themselves and present it to their team. We use it in our committee meetings as well. So, and it's been really, really powerful and impactful so far. We've introduced pronouns on emails, and I cannot stress enough how powerful this action was. It just shows our support as an ally. And an interesting thing that I found out as I was preparing for this webinar today is that there are gendered language. There's a gender neutral language, like the, you know, English in UK, and there is a gender free language, and like Finnish, where gender doesn't feature within language itself. But for example, if you talk about French, it's a very gendered language, because, you know, a table is a she, or, you know, the wall is a he, and it's an interesting way that we approach the world. And we, you know, when we, you know, in Finland, for example, when you meet a person, you don't really talk about their gender straight away. You engage with them in a different, meaningful way. So that I found that really, really interesting, how huge differences in languages there are over the world. Moving on is actively talking about allyship and how we practically apply it in everyday life. We produced calling in and calling out guides, and we started introducing guidance on, you know, on our terms of reference as well, on how to behave in a meeting, and, you know, to be inclusive and make sure it's a safe space, and amplify those voices that, you know, are underrepresented on the committee. And our leadership team is very good in modeling positive behavior. And, you know, later on I'll speak about it, but, you know, I can't stress enough how important it is to have leadership buy-in and really support throughout everything that you do. We do have representation of the LGBTQ plus community in our senior leadership, and that makes a whole lot of difference. And, you know, using the power of sharing the power of sharing stories to bring our values and the culture to life. Again, used very often by our leadership team. We found it really impactful, and it actually makes people feel confident to open up conversations in this space as well, and feel it is a safe space to talk about various different communities. Find it's a safe space to talk about themselves and bring their whole selves to work. And finally, it's about celebrating people and celebrating achievements. And in this year, we've celebrated Pride way more than we used to do in the past years. So we did have a Pride talk about educating ourselves about Pride history, and historic movements, people, really important people who've really moved the dial in this space. We've produced a series of, printed a series of lanyards that we can wear with Pride, and we've given it away to our staff and members. And we just held a celebration in the office with food and drinks, inviting all our colleagues to come together. And one thing I was really amazed about is by how many people approached me on the day or following the day of the webinar, to say how grateful they were and how important it is for them to see those kinds of celebrations and gatherings happening. And it's not just people representing the community, it's anyone really from all the types of communities. So it just really showed to me that simple things like that really makes a difference. It makes people feel valued and seen and heard and included in the institution. So a message, a message of solidarity in the form of a change of logo, special announcement from the CEO, or a guest speaker is a great starting point. But we need to think about how do we internalize these messages. So do we have ERGs, so-called, in many organizations for this community? Have we got representation of the community at senior level? At Taimiki we do. And do your senior leaders understand and appreciate and embrace the community? So again, going back to that education piece. And in terms of our kind of next things and what's on the radar for us, it's there are three probably major things that I could touch upon in terms of the strategy. And importance of having a strategy with senior leadership buy-in is paramount. Inclusion for the Taimiki sits at the core of the 2030 strategy, which has the vision of building a global, inclusive, digitally enabled engineering community. And embedding D&I within company strategy, naming different communities explicitly within our strategy. By the way, at Taimiki, we will be refreshing our strategy, D&I strategy, in the next year, and we plan to be very intentional in outlining how we are going to welcome different communities to our institution and make it a really inclusive and welcoming space for all. Power of networks. Are there employee resource groups for members of the LGBTQ+ community and allies to create a safe space and a channel for communication to senior leaders? And I'll talk about what we are about to launch in the next couple of months shortly. And third one is around data. And one of the probably toughest one for many organizations, as I speak to many other engineering companies and other institutions as well, it's the toughest one to crack. We are at the start of that journey. As an organization, we gathered the confidence now. We built a solid foundation. We defined a clear business case for why this is important. And data is the next big thing for us to unpack and understand where we could bring most impact. For example, understanding how included or excluded people representing the LGBTQ+ community feel. And again, we do struggle for inclusion to be accepted in some parts of our membership, but we do make ourselves accountable for our actions. We will not put a statement on a website, but we'll continue to strive to create a space for individuals to feel safe and celebrated. And to finish off, I wanted to talk to you about Taimiki. We will be launching our Culture Ambassador Network. And we are about August, September. So we are looking to have people from this community who would tell us what to do, how we can build upon what we have achieved so far and grow. This will be an opportunity to engage with all communities, so they're visible, they're valued, and can bring their voice to the table. So if it's one action that you can take away from today, please, please, please engage with our Culture Ambassador Network. We'll be sharing more information towards the end of the summer, probably September time, because we want to ensure we've got representations from people of all walks of life. And I think that will be the end of my presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So interesting. Again, another great example of an institution that's really taking a proactive approach to improve the culture within engineering. I've been to several events recently, including at the Royal Academy in the celebration of International Women in Engineering Day, and at the Equal Engineers Network conference. And similar things have sort of occurred through both your presentations and both of those conferences. So I think we're really all heading in the right direction, and hopefully, despite current environments in certain areas of society, we can hope to keep striving in the right direction. And I think we've really got some great momentum to do that. I'll open the floor to any sort of questions. If you type in the Q&A, I think we can see them clearer than if you use the chat function. So it would be great to hear some of the people that we have with us on this webinar share some either thoughts or questions that they might have. In the meantime, someone's just said the chat is disabled. I appreciate that. Apologies, I can't unpick that. Potentially my colleague might be able to. But if not, feel free to use the question option in the question and answer, like a chat function. It seems to be working. In the meantime, thank you, Jenny. Oh, I've got one question already. Thank you. What is the one thing allies could do to make a tangible difference? Christina, you might want to pick up that one first, and then we'll come to Eric.
Yes. You know, I think first of all is educating yourself. If you're not part of the LGBTQ+ community, I want to learn more. You know, I think we shouldn't rely on our peers to educate you on the community, or, you know, there are a wealth of resources out there and many helpful groups for learning and building, you know, empathy. And so people may be out in some situations, and you know, it's worth reminding remembering that some people may be out in some situations but not others. For example, they may use different pronouns around family or refer to their partners differently in the workplace. So follow their lead and never disclose information on someone else's behalf without their permission. I think that's the most powerful thing to take away. Probably I'll start from there. If I started from zero, I'd probably start from educating myself, and then you gradually gather the confidence to really step in and amplify the voice of those marginalized groups in any situation.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Christina, is that the first step is obviously education, educating yourself, asking questions when appropriate. And also, I think in terms of making a tangible difference, allies need to be willing to get it wrong and stick their neck out on issues where they're maybe a little bit uncomfortable. Because even when you challenge behavior and you're met with backlash, that doesn't mean that you've not succeeded in correcting that behavior going forward. A lot of times you might try to correct some behavior and somebody will aggressively defend themselves, but then they'll go away and think, maybe I won't do that again next time, because they realize that there are people that will speak up. So yeah, willing allies that are, doing the active work and putting their neck out and risking, the hard conversations are really important, I think.
I totally agree. I'd also say that from my perspective that education can take a lot of different forms. It doesn't just have to be from a website. We've had quite a successful sort of wider intersectional book or film TV series club within our company. We work quite remotely, so sharing book recommendations or media sources that are out there that allows people to absorb the information or learn about different people's perspectives or cultures in a different way, whether that's an audiobook or something, is a good way to encourage that.
And Joanna, if I may, I would add that, you know, sharing your pronouns is really, really powerful. I think sometimes people don't really understand the power of it and why would I share my pronoun, but it really sends the message to other people that it is a safe space to be yourself when you are with me, you know, and it doesn't mean, you know, you're a part of the community or not. It's not at all about that. Everyone should be sharing their pronouns.
Yeah, I think
I
so.
would echo that. Yeah, even though I didn't share my pronouns, I totally agree with Christina. It's a really quick way to signal that you're an ally.
I definitely think so. It's important to normalize that with allies, but it's also equally important to acknowledge that people don't have to share their pronouns, and it's maybe not always a representation that they aren't supportive. They just might not feel comfortable. We have to be mindful that people might not always want to share their pronouns as a way of not outing or misgendering themselves in certain spaces. But yeah, as an ally, it's super important and definitely one way we can sort of demonstrate our safe space, as it were. Oh, I don't have any other questions coming in from the chat. So if anyone wants to add some in, for you, do you have anything that's what's your thoughts while you've been listening to the other co-host?
No, I honestly don't. But I would like to thank both of you for joining today. It's been very, very interesting. So thank you very much for the presentations you've done. You've both been quite comprehensive, really. So I don't really have any questions.
That's perfect. I just have one for Eric. You've been running the Culture Plus for a while now. Have you had any response or feedback or anything that has been fed back from the people that are involved in the scheme so far? That you're able to share, that is.
Well, I mean, we did an extensive sort of like overview and overhaul of the site just before we launched in November. So there was a lot of feedback about how like some of the resources didn't work or didn't really speak to us in the way that they were written. So we have tweaked a lot of I mean, more than tweak, redone a lot of things. And I think, you know, that's one of the things I'm learning about the engineering community is we collect data, change things, and then collect more data. So I'm sure it's going to be an ever evolving tool that will continue to get better and better as people use it and give us feedback that we are asking for. Yeah.
Perfect. Actually,
but if you're asking for something specific, I can't think of anything specific.
No. I was just curious as to. It's always good to get a response out of something because it proves people are actively engaging in the process and the system. So, from I don't know, just sharing things, how it changed things and where I work. If you get a response, even if it's positive or negative, it's great because you're getting engagement from a platform or a change or something. So,
yeah. I will say maybe one of our specific changes was that we had the modules grouped into 3 different groups based on what we thought was like hyper categories. People didn't understand that and it made no sense to them without like further detailed explanation. And then we sort of realized, well, it doesn't really matter. Like we don't really need to group these in another way. Let's just put them all there and people can just decide. So yeah, that was feedback.
Perfect. So I've got one in from an equal engineer colleague, Stuart. He said, have you been able to identify particularly effective ways to encourage startups in particular to engage with Culture Plus?
Yes. I think the most effective way that we found so far is to really just have a dialogue with them about what their challenges are and then sort of point out that those challenges are cultural issues, or cultural issues are sort of preventing them from overcoming those challenges. Because I think especially in startups, there's a lot of sort of affinity there. There's a lot of agreement. Everyone feels like they're on the same page. But what they don't realize is that a lack of diverse perspectives, for example, might be hindering some solutions to things that they're working on. And so we sort of have to point that out and show them how they can get diverse perspectives, even though they're a small team, because they think, well, we can't really shift our culture until we grow and we get more people, because we have a great culture. We all get along. That's not what that means. So it's a lot of explanation about like what culture means and sort of what your challenges are and how those relate to culture. It's a lot of sort of basic steps about explanation that it has been really effective in sort of then making people realize, oh, okay, yeah, even though I am like just friendly to everybody, that doesn't mean that I'm necessarily, making decisions that are eliminating bias or understanding that my decisions that I'm making might be biased. So it's been a fun journey to sort of like work with a bunch of different startups and help them sort of realize that.
That sounds great. It's really great that the Royal Academy is putting the support there. And as you say, small businesses make up such a large part of our sector. So we're really going to see some change, hopefully.
Yeah.
Reaching. It's come back again, sort of into engineering. Main focus of the small organizations again, or individual employees that don't have such an established LGBT or employee resource group within the companies, because that's where we can create a sense of community and support and offer resources there, which in engineering is particularly pertinent, given, as you said, how many small and medium-sized businesses that there are, which is quite unique compared to some of the other sectors outside of the space.
It's interesting. Sorry, if I might say something. I read this article that talked about how belonging is really important to people, and belonging can take a number of different ways. And if you don't feel like underrepresented people with underrepresented backgrounds don't feel like they belong in the engineering community, but if they can find a community within engineering that they belong to. So if they can join Inter-Engineering, for example, and find that belonging there, then that belonging will sort of bleed into their job and their career and make them just a more effective leader, a more effective engineer, and just a happier and more it also increases your self-esteem if you feel like you're belonging to a bunch of different groups. So Inter-Engineering is a great organization.
Thank you. That's great to hear. And yeah, it rings true to myself and my own personal experiences, as well as others that are close to my perspectives. I've got a really great question here, and thank you so much for the first asking it. And it's both of you. What were your first overall impressions of inclusion within the engineering industry in general, having both come from sectors that weren't related to engineering? Christina, if maybe you'd like to start.
Is that the question about what we're excited on our D&I journeys? Is that the one, or?
No, sorry, it's just on that. It's what was your first overall impression of inclusion within the industry?
Yeah, well, I really had poor understanding of what engineering is, like many, unfortunately, and a very stereotyped image of engineering when I joined IMechE back in 2017. And then when I really discovered what it is about, I found it really fascinating. And I thought to myself, oh, why didn't I know this before? Why no one told me about it? Because maybe I would have chosen a career in engineering. Sounds really exciting. So in terms of inclusion, I'm not personally an engineer, so I can't talk on behalf of myself, but I can talk on behalf of those individuals I've been speaking to. It differs from company to company. What I tend to see in those bigger organizations who have the resources and have a D&I team in place, and it's really embedded, and they've got networks and events, and it's embedded within their structure. we see, you know, I see that people feel overall much more engaged, motivated. Their well-being is really good, you know. But what I tend to see, sadly, from those members I've been speaking to and those who confidentially have been approaching me, is that in those smaller companies, those SMEs, it tends to be that there's no, you know, they have to champion D&I by themselves, and it can feel a very lonely place. And usually, most of the time, they have to battle for and gain the support of the leadership. And, you know, if you're one woman in an engineering small organization, it is really, really, really tough. And then, you know, it makes me question, you know, what are the odds that, you know, the woman will be back into the workplace, or, you know, she might change her career trajectory. So it really differs. There's no one answer probably to this, and it's really from what I've discovered so far from those conversations I had. So there is a long way for us to learn and improve, and I think Royal Academy are doing great, fantastic work in this space and supporting those small companies, you know, like with the Culture Plus platform. Giving them the tools, because a lot of the times there are no tools, and you know, small companies don't know where to start, and yeah, comes Culture Plus.
My experience has been really interesting. I grew up in a, you know, pretty diverse suburb. I went to university where it was very sort of homogenous. And then I moved to New York where it was very diverse. And then I, you know, moved to London, it's very diverse. Working in media is very diverse. And then now I'm in engineering, and it is diverse in certain areas, but it's we've got a long way to go. And I think you can see that, but I think that the interesting thing is that when you talk to, my experience, this is my experience, when I've talked to a lot of people in the industry, they attribute the lack of diversity to a pipeline issue. And having worked in a bunch of other organizations and fields and been from other places, you know, the reason there's a pipeline issue is because there's a cultural issue. So I think I think like tools like Culture Plus that are focused specifically on making a good culture are really great ways to long-term fix that pipeline issue. And so my impressions of inclusion in engineering industry in general are not understanding the core problems is a big barrier. But also it's not that big of a barrier because there is an appetite to do something. And I think once you sort of shift that understanding about what we can do to help, it's really easy to bring people along on that journey.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we tend as engineers to be quite process driven, but if we don't have a process to follow, then some people lose confidence or a lack of understanding and to which direction to head. So yeah, certainly I think if we're able to give people a process, then those of us that maybe aren't already bought into the EDI journey and the belief of culture, it allows the majority to get on board if they have sort of a strategy and a sort of timeline, and they can see sort of the improvements as they go along. It sort of really gives that ability to shift culture, as you say, and gain momentum. I'll wrap it up now, but just thanks again so much for joining us this evening. It's been fascinating to hear what Nikki and the Royal Academy have been up to, and also your own personal journeys. Thanks so much for sharing. It's been great, and I'd encourage everyone on the call and also watching the recording to reach out and engage with both the Ambassadors Programme that's upcoming and also the Royal Academy's initiatives, whether that's Culture Plus or the other excellent programs that they're running.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Eric, Poggy. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Have
very
a great
much for joining.
evening.
And
Just as a, oh, sorry, go on, Michael.
I think we're about to say the same thing. Yeah, for those on the call, remember that we have one of these sessions every month with topics changing based on events that might be happening in the month or on certain days. It's non-binary awareness week in July next month, so the July edition of Re-Engineering Pride will be on that.
Yes, that's exactly what I was following up with. So excellent. Cheers. Have a great evening all. Bye.